Hey everyone, have you ever wondered what happens to your assets if the unexpected happens? In today's episode, I'll dive into why trusts and wills are more than just legal jargon. They are essential for securing your family's future. Join me as I chat with Andrew Cohen, my trusted estate planning attorney, to uncover the secrets. Let's dive in. Hello, thank you so much for being here, Andrew.
Hi, Christina.
This is a talk that I've been really wanting to have because of our personal relationship over the last several years where you have helped both me and my family with our trusts and wills, and I think it is such an essential topic to discuss. You're the perfect person to talk to because you have been a trust and estate attorney for, 15 years now?
Yeah, a little bit more, 15 years.
Yeah, so over 15 years. So
Yep.
You've seen it all. So at the intersection of our two lines of work, as a residential real estate broker, most of my clients' largest assets is their home. And so one of the first conversations I have with them is, have you considered putting your home into a trust? Talk to us about why having a trust as a homeowner is so important.
There's a lot of reasons, right? Trusts can do a lot of different things, and they can be flexible, they can be rigid, different people, different reasons. So kind of skipping ahead, and I know we'll cover some other things, but having a trust in place is really, really important because if something happens in your life, someone dies, someone becomes incapacitated, if you don't have any planning in place, it's too late to put it in place. I refer to it as private planning. If you don't have anything in place, you get the public plan, which is not a plan, it's a court system. So if someone dies or becomes incapacitated without having put anything in place, it's too late, and you're stuck in court.
So essentially, one main reason is if you want to retain control over what happens to your assets in the worst case scenario that you have passed away or you become incapacitated, at least by planning in advance for this, you retain control over what happens as opposed to the California state court deciding what happens to it.
Yeah, if someone becomes incapacitated, there's no one, without planning, if someone just becomes incapacitated, right, whether it's Alzheimer's, some form of dementia, maybe someone has a stroke or heart attack, hopefully they recover. Maybe someone's in a car accident and they're heavily medicated. If you can't make decisions for yourself, no one else has any legal authority to step in and do it. If you're married, spouse doesn't have any legal authority. You could be married, you could have adult children, you could have parents, you could have siblings. They all may or may not want to be involved. They all may have different thoughts, different decisions. No one can step in and do it. And failing that, family's going to have to go to court for a conservatorship.
I think that's so interesting, and I think probably a very common misconception that people have when talking about, for example, married couples. You would think your spouse may have some legal capacity to act on your behalf, but the fact that they don't is actually rather shocking, and even more of a reason, I would say, to make sure that you don't delay on preparing a trust.
Definitely. I mean, most of my married clients want the spouse to be the person making these decisions. So we want to get it in writing. Sometimes people have a blended family, and maybe the couple's been married for 3 years, and they have kids that are in their 20s or their 30s. Well, who's known each other longer? So you can easily see where things can sort of go different directions, different issues. People get along, people don't in these scenarios. Want to put planning in place because everyone's different.
Right.
So you don't want to be stuck. A conservatorship is not good.
In a conservatorship, I mean, when the courts get involved, could it be like a months-long process, a years-long process before
it could
decisions are made?
It could be weeks if things are being fought, right? There's celebrity conservatorships. Those are typically very dramatic, very different, right? But for the most part, you have to go into court. You have to set up a hearing. Can the person that you're trying to be conserved make it to court? What's going on? Who's representing them? Someone bringing the conservatorship is saying, I want to be in charge. And maybe someone challenges it. Maybe the new spouse challenges it versus, biological son or daughter. And who knows what's going on, right? So you're in court, and the judge is trying to figure out, ultimately, who can make these decisions for this person, right?
So it's definitely not straightforward.
No.
But with a trust, it can be.
Yeah, well, just to kind of clarify something. When we're talking about incapacity, right, there's really two areas there. One is health and medical decisions, where you're going to live, talking to doctors, what medicine to take, course of treatment, do we do surgery now, do we delay? that's that. There's also dealing with assets, finances, investment, social security, the house, business. All of those things need to be thought of as well.
So drawing on, I'm glad you brought that up, because drawing from our experience in working with you when it came to my parents' trust, it was one of those things where we sat down around the kitchen table. You were with us, and you were asking us questions about exactly what you had mentioned: assets, what they have, what they don't have, what happens if, in the case of incapacity, what medications are they on. We were really looking at all aspects of their lives, and you were really helping us walk through all these different scenarios that I don't think most people really just think about on a daily basis.
Yeah, everyone is different. Different people ask different questions, different things. Some things I typically don't get involved in on granular level, but bigger things, because it's important. You don't know what people are like, right? Like we were talking about before we started today. Everyone's different. People are single, people are married, people have kids, they don't. They have young kids, they have adult kids. They have adult kids that are adults because they're 19, but they're not really experienced. They don't really have, you want your 20-year-old kid that's spending more time, partying at college to making decisions like this if something happens. People are blended families, or the Brady Bunch. People at Brady Bunch that don't get along. Everyone's different.
Right.
Everyone's different.
So I think the key to know is that a trust can be definitely customized for each particular person's needs and their life situation.
Yeah, and trust, and typically the planning that I do for people is I refer to it myself as a trust-focused or trust-centered planning, because we have several different documents that are going to be in place. And so the trust is kind of the centerpiece. To be a little bit more specific, the trust itself has nothing to do with making health and medical decisions. We have our own parts of that we go through and put in place. The trust is dealing more with assets during incapacity, as well as someone passing away. But different things doing different things, and it's important to talk to the client and not just guess, not just even have them. My questionnaire I use to gather information. But I still want to talk to people. I still want to go through concepts and make sure that people are aware, because many, many times it triggers thoughts or ideas that, they just didn't have, and I'm not capturing through just, some questionnaire.
I remember the questionnaire, and it was very detailed, and it covered a lot of different aspects of planning. And at the same time, you're right, when we were having that conversation, digging into those questions about the different assets and how my parents felt about having this person involved or that person involved, or what would happen to those assets, a questionnaire is a great start. But really having those deeper conversations and thinking about different scenarios really adds a whole different element to it.
Yeah, when I get questionnaires back from people, like we said, everybody's different. Their lives are different. And sometimes I get things back and I look at it as makes sense, and I talk to people and we don't change much. Other times I see right off the bat that people are answering question A conflicts with C, conflicts with X. And you have to reconcile these things.
Give me an example, and give our viewers an example of a few of these questions. Because one of my questions for you is, okay, before they speak with you or any trust attorney of their choice, what should they be prepared with?
Right.
What questions should they ask? What should they be thinking about?
Before they speak with me, nothing. Right? I mean, if people are watching this and they're interested in a trust, a lot of people call me up and they have all different levels of experience. Some people say, oh, my parents had a trust. Our situation is similar. It's different. Or my mom passed away. She had nothing. We were in court. We were in probate for 3 years. It was a nightmare. I need to do something. My husband and I are married. We have 3 kids. What do we do? Some people say, oh, I think I know a little bit. Some people think they know nothing. To me, it really doesn't matter what people know, because I have my process. And part of my process includes, once we get going, talking about concepts, how things work. Trust can be very flexible. There's different kinds of trust. They can stay flexible. They can do different things, different purposes, satisfy different legal needs, give people benefits. My area is more like death, incapacity for individuals, families. I can talk about some other things. But people don't really need to know much of anything. I talk them through this. I have them do the questionnaire, fill out what they can. We talked about the questionnaire being detailed. but it's only as long or as short as it needs to be, right? So if you play a guitar, right, there are plenty of great songs that have 3 chords, and that's all they have, right? Ramones, I love the Ramones, right?
Yeah.
Easy. And then you can go the other end, and you can have, Dwayne Allman Brothers, Eric Clapton playing the same instrument, and it's wild, and it's totally different. Families are like that. Everything's different, right? So the questionnaire is only as long as short as it needs to be. And if something doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply. If it does, we get into it. I have some questions on the questionnaire that are very, very short for a specific purpose because it elicits conversation. So it just depends. But we're looking at, again, people's lives, assets, trying to peer into the future.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, when it comes to a trust, the trust document itself, the key is to identify your various assets, right? Whether it's real estate, jewelry, wine collection, art collection, business. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Any other investments, anything of sentimental value? Like
Sometimes,
it doesn't necessarily have to be just dollar valuable.
No,
but
no.
Identifying all of those items of value, whether sentimental or financial, and including them in the trust so that the trust encompasses all those various assets. And the trust will spell out what is to happen to those assets and who is to determine how to, for example, divide the assets in the event of your death or incapacity.
Yeah, someone's got to be in charge.
If
if I can't make decisions or anyone can't make decisions for themselves, who can do it? And we don't want to leave it to chance. We want to make sure we have someone in charge.
Right.
Right? Someone passes away and you have kids. And let's say the kids are younger than 30, right? You still probably want to have someone handle these things on behalf of these kids until they reach an age that we think they will be responsible and they will be mature enough. If your kids are older enough now, we go about it one way. If they're young, I have 3 kids. Oldest is 21. I'm not leaving anything directly to them.
Right.
And it just depends. Talk about life insurance. I'm not going to leave $1 million in life insurance to 3 kids that are 21, 18, and 11. Right? I need someone that's going to handle these things in the right way for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what happens over time if somebody wants to make adjustments to their trust? Is that possible? What do they do?
Yeah.
What if they change their mind about something that was previously important but now it isn't anymore, or relationships change?
People have falling out with people. That seems to be the biggest thing. People have falling out and they say, I don't want this person anywhere near it. For the most part, the work that I do with people is revocable trusts as opposed to irrevocable, much harder to change. So if people want to change some things, what the process is in the future just depends. Are we, changing a light bulb, or are we rewiring the house? It just kind of depends. So we can make changes. Sometimes it's self-contained in one document. Sometimes it's a similar change through several different documents. It just depends.
Why would somebody choose to establish an irrevocable trust versus a revocable trust?
Okay, that is a good question. And I actually talk to all my clients now, even if it's not applicable, because I found over the years that people would ask. And then I found that talking about an irrevocable trust, and I try and talk about it usually earlier in my conversations, even if it's not applicable, because it does, I found, a good compare and contrast. So, if I may, trust can be, I think, sort of categorized very broadly as irrevocable or revocable. Most of my clients were doing a revocable trust. It's flexible now. You maintain full use and control of your assets during your lifetime. And it's there for purposes that aren't going to take effect until the future. Irrevocable trusts can be for very specific needs now. Irrevocable trusts may spring out of irrevocable trusts in the future. Leave that to the side. But sometimes people have a need for an irrevocable trust now because there's certain reasons. So a couple of examples. Maybe there's a special needs person in the family, and that person is getting certain benefits. But if that person were to get assets or money of their own, they'll be disqualified very quickly from their benefits. So maybe grandma or grandpa has left them some money. And now the family has to scramble, get into court, establish an irrevocable special needs trust to really own and control those assets on behalf of the special needs person. Keep the benefits. Maybe different example, maybe people have a potential estate tax. So very quickly, for the viewers at home, all different kinds of taxes. Income tax, state and federal, property tax, sales tax, different taxes. The estate tax is a tax on someone's estate, their assets, when they pass away. Due and payable 9 months. It's a federal tax, not California. When the estate tax applies, it starts at 35% currently and goes higher. But it's marginal, so it only applies above the exemption amount. And if someone dies this year, the exemption is $13.99 million. So it doesn't apply to most people.
Right.
But if you're worth $14 million or more, you might want to say, I'm going to do some planning. Or if you think your assets are going to grow to that. You never know. So maybe you use an irrevocable trust to move appreciating assets out of your estate now into the irrevocable trust, freeze that value now. Or maybe you can put a life insurance policy in that other trust so if someone passes away, that money can offset and pay some. There's different things, trying to keep it short. But the idea is there's different purposes of the irrevocable trust. But they're trade-offs. And what's given up very often is some degree or even all use and control of your own assets because they're not really yours anymore. Irrevocable trusts have to file their own tax returns. Irrevocable trusts put vested legal rights in other people from the moment they're created, and they're really hard to change. So if it makes sense for someone, they can do it. But unless it's wanted and still needed, people don't want to do it.
Got it.
So.
Wow, so interesting.
Sort of a longish answer, but that was actually the short version.
Well, I think it's important to know because there are, like you mentioned, different kinds of trusts and they serve different purposes. And just like you said, every situation is different. So there is no cookie cutter solution when it comes to trust and estate planning. There's the element of protecting your assets. There's the element of taxation benefits as well. You know, a lot of different things to think about and consider.
Yeah, different people focus on different things, right? Like for you, you're mostly residential.
Yeah.
Right? Do you sell commercial property?
I used to quite a bit.
You could,
yeah.
but you don't.
I could, yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is that you kind of look at things. So for me, I don't really get into huge taxable issues or different things like that. But I have friends and colleagues that do that. And I know what I do. And sometimes people call me up and they're not really sure. So I always want to make sure I talk to someone because sometimes I'll get a submittal through my website and I'll read it and I'll be like, well, this isn't what I do. But I call the people up and half the time I find out that they don't know what they're talking about. And I talk to them. I talked to 2 people this week, one yesterday. The email came in and if I had just responded and said, I don't do that, I wouldn't have set up an upcoming meeting with this woman and her husband, which is great. So I want to call back and talk to people.
Right.
Because it's such an area of life that most people don't know what I do or why they do it. People call me up, and they stumble around, understandably so. Oh, I need a will, or I don't know if I need a will or a trust, or I need a living will. A living will isn't even a thing in California. So it's okay when people are kind of fumbling around. I try and put them at ease and say, it's okay. We're going to explain it. You're not ordering a burger off the menu and you say, but I want extra pickles and no onions. It doesn't matter. We're going to go through it. We're going to talk conceptually. I have a general idea if I ask some questions, and then things can change. But it just depends.
I think this is a great segue since you brought up wills. Explain to us, what is a will? How does it differ? How does it differ from a trust? And in what scenarios would a will be more appropriate than a trust?
Okay, not many. So people have their estate. And your estate is your assets. So you have a home, you have a business, you have investments, insurance, baseball card collection, all different kinds of things. You have your stuff. And if someone passes away, it needs to be handled, right? Final tax return filed, maybe some valuations. But ultimately, when people think about it, it's like, who's going to inherit? Where are these assets going to go? So if people don't have any planning in place, you have nothing, and someone dies, it's called they died intestate. They have nothing in place. Their estate is going to have to go to probate court. It's going to have to go to probate court for probate administration. The term probate itself, I looked this up once because I was curious. Latin derivation meaning to prove out. And the court, really the judge, the court is trying to figure out who's in charge, who's owed what, who's getting what, what's kept, what's sold. There's no help for kids. It's going to be 2.5 years. It's expensive, time consuming, court appearances. We don't want to go there.
Right.
If someone has only a will in place, their estate's going to probate. and everything that I just mentioned. So typically a will is not enough. Sometimes it's okay. Usually we look to a trust because it can do a lot of different things and things that you want that a will can't. A will, maybe if typically someone is older, they maybe live with their adult kids or they rent, they have maybe a bank account, there's no real estate, there's no business, they're going to leave assets to maybe one child, maybe they can get away with a will. Right? Still want to do some additional incapacity planning, but usually my clients that need a will, that's kind of the scenario. I never assume that everybody needs a trust. I want to talk to people because if they don't need a trust, it doesn't make sense to do it. So I don't force that on anyone. But it's really, I'd say 1-2% of my clients that don't, because most people life is such a way. Even if everyone's different to some extent, most people trust makes much more sense.
So it seems like one of the main differentiators between whether a will or a trust would be more appropriate is really dependent on the extent of the assets.
Well, and the family situation, right? It could be both. Because if someone wants to make sure that they have someone in charge, maybe someone has, they rent where they live, okay? So you don't have a home. And maybe you have bank accounts. And maybe you want to say, well, I have bank accounts and I'm just going to name my son as the beneficiary on this account. Well, but if people, let's say the kids are young, you don't want to just leave assets to people that aren't ready to handle it.
Right.
Maybe you want to make sure that assets are left to other people in your family differently. You don't want to just leave everything to one person and say, you're in charge, take care of your sister, take care of your brother, take care of your kids. You never know, right? So it's oftentimes you're looking at everything, assets, family situation, et cetera. Sometimes it makes sense for just a will, but not always.
Yeah.
Not usually.
It sounds like more often a trust is going to be the more appropriate vehicle to really put those protections in place. And, this is interesting too. In one of my previous episodes, I had our very dear friend, your brother from another mother, actually, Rob Cohen.
Love Rob.
He's amazing.
Yep.
And he was sitting right in that chair where you are. And one of the things that he said that I think was just so brilliant and on such a human level is when you are dealing with a loved one's death, their passing, the first thing he tells his clients is take the time to grieve, right? And so I think something important that we can do while we're alive is to not bury our heads in the sand and pretend that we're not going to die, because nobody's escaping this, right?
Yep. No.
Be proactive. Meet with an estate planning attorney. Put your trust or your will or your advanced medical directive together so that while you're alive, you can have the control over what happens
You're not giving up
to your
anything.
asset. Yeah, no, exactly. You're not giving
Right.
up anything. In fact, you're really retaining more control. And to Rob's point, your final gift, if you will, as you leave this earth, is to allow your loved ones to actually take time to grieve your loss properly, as opposed to now being hit with a bunch of legal stuff to work with. Great, you're mourning the loss of a loved one, and now you need to go to court. Now I don't know what to do. Who's in charge of this? Who's in charge of that? It just becomes way more stressful than it needs to be.
Right, then it needs to be. It's still going to be stressful.
Yes,
it's
of
still going to be
course.
sad. It's still going to be all these awful things that we don't want to think about. But what you just said there in a moment or two, there's so many different pieces I can pull out and go. I talk to people, people call me up, contact me, talk to people. Most people want to get going. They might not know what it is. I talk to them, we do it. Some people call me up and they say, well, I really want to do this, but my husband, my wife, not so sure. And I said, well, you guys got to get on the same page. And what happens is some people say, oh, my husband doesn't want to talk about it. I said, okay. When I said, talking about this doesn't mean that the cartoon anvil is going to fall on your head just because you talked about it. But I said, I will guarantee you. And as a lawyer, I'm not allowed to guarantee my work, believe it or not. Legal ethics, legal rules. But I will guarantee you that if you don't talk about it and you don't put anything in place, I'll guarantee that you're leaving a mess for your spouse. And that's really selfish and not fair. Because if you have one spouse that wants to do it, If that spouse becomes incapacitated, how are you going to help that spouse that wanted to do the planning if you haven't done it?
Yeah.
And if the spouse that doesn't want to do it becomes incapacitated, that's really unfair to the spouse that wanted to do it, or adult kids, or whoever has to deal with it. And people might not become incapacitated, hopefully not, but we're all going to pass away at some point. And if you stick your head in the sand and ignore it, it's selfish, and you're just leaving a big mess for people. So I try and go about everything in a not really a mean or sad or maudlin way, but try and keep everything as positive and proactive as we can to get to the point where we say, all right, I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad we've done this. I feel good about it. And like I tell people, this is not affecting your life now, but when it's needed and it's there. And like Rob said, if someone passes away and now that family's going to have to go deal with court and maybe fight with, the deceased siblings or other kids, that's a nightmare. If you can put planning in place and have direction, you still might have fights, maybe not, but at least wishes are known, everything's there, and you're not going to have to go to court. You put things in place and you can deal with it. You can grieve and not have to worry about what are we going to do? Well, we need so much headway to get in a court and do all this. You can handle things.
I've worked on cases on both opposite ends of the spectrum, and
meaning probate versus trust.
Exactly. A family member passes away, and now the successor trustee is now in charge of selling the property. Yes, they're grieving, and that being said, they have the time to do that, and they have their marching orders. The trust document said this: once we sell the home, the money is going to go to this person, to that person. It's very clearly laid out. There is minimal to no drama.
Right. Sometimes people know that people are going to fight.
In a lot of cases. And that's why I said minimal. You never know what's going to come out of the woodwork. But when everything is spelled out, you have the marching orders, you have the directions, right? You have the instruction manual, so to speak.
Right.
On the other end, I've seen, and Rob and I have worked on cases together that have gone to probate court. It can become such a mess, unfortunately. You have one family member who's trying to keep it all together. They're level-headed. You have another family member or multiple family members coming out of the woodwork, making an already emotionally grueling and terrible situation even worse. Egos are getting involved. So-and-so was slighted at one point in time, and he or she thinks that they deserve more of this or less of that, and everybody has their opinions. And it can just get emotionally taxing for the people involved. And also, the longer it takes, the more it's going to cost.
Right.
There's not just the emotional cost of it, but the financial cost the longer you get embroiled in court hearings and everything that comes with it.
You want to try and keep it there, and I agree with all of that. Also, putting this together sort of helps organize things, right? Because people, talk to people and they say, oh, my mom died, and I don't know. I know she had these property, but I think she had an account, or we had insurance, but I don't know where it is. And I'm like, I don't know. But so if we try and do things ahead of time and we organize things and we have some coherent thought to it, now when the time comes and something's happened, things are much more organized for the people that need to step in.
Right.
Too.
I mean, I know from us working together in the trust, it's here's the bank account, this account number, that account number, at this institution, so on and so forth.
It forces some organization.
Exactly, which is really important. And it's funny, I don't think a lot of people realize maybe how not organized they are about certain things to some extent until questions start to be asked. And they're like, oh, well, I think I have this, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to need to look into it. And if you're the person in charge and you don't know the answer to these questions, what makes you think your adult child that you're counting on or your spouse knows any better than you do? Right.
I had just an example, and this is, 15 years ago, 12, 14, 15 years ago. I had someone get in touch, and I had to work on this thing where it was a young couple. They were maybe very early 30s, no kids. And the husband passed away suddenly.
Oh.
And the wife was certain that he had a life insurance policy, but she didn't have any details. So we were scouring credit cards, statements, bank statements, anything to see if we could find some kind of payment. Tried to call up some, people that the family knew, because there's no record of this. Looking over, we never found anything. And she was certain that there was a life insurance policy, but she couldn't find anything. I kind of think that maybe he told her there was and there wasn't. But if he had things organized, then maybe it would have turned out differently. So,
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this has been very enlightening. I really hope that people don't live in the world of denial, because it could seem to be, a difficult conversation to have, difficult for somebody to contemplate their own incapacity or what would happen when they pass away.
Right.
It's not the most pleasant topic for most people
No.
to sit down and think about
Right.
and plan about, but truly taking a few hours, a few weeks to plan everything out, get all the details ironed out, can make such a difference in the quality of life for your loved ones after your passing. And also, I know from my personal experience as well, the peace of mind that comes with just knowing that you have done this and you have crossed it off the list, and that you have done something that you actually do have control over.
Yeah, I agree. When I was in my, teenager, my 20s, and peace of mind was a marketing slogan on commercials I didn't pay attention to. And as I've done this for years, so many people use that phrase or something similar. I'm glad I've done this. I feel better. 80-90% of people that I talk to for the first time said, we've been pushing this off for years. Everyone says they've been pushing it off for years, whether they are 80 or 50 or 30. Everyone's been pushing it off.
Yeah.
Need to do it. And everyone, not everyone, but so many people say, I'm glad I've done it. I feel better. It gives me peace of mind. Some variation on that. And having myself grown over the years, I'm married. I have kids. It is an intangible but very real thing, that peace of mind, to have it in place.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Is there any sort of, are there any misconceptions that people have about trusts and wills? Any myths that you have kind of come across as you've been working with them that you find yourself commonly debunking when people approach you for the first time?
Not really. I mean, I think that maybe if there's one, it's that people think that they better get a will in place, because if they don't have the will, the government's going to take everything. And that's not really as draconian as they make it seem. Things would go to court. It is more expensive, et cetera, but the government's not just going to come in and take everything. So that's a little bit much. Even putting that aside, saying that's not really the case, still need to do it. That's not saying that's not really the case is not a reason to say, oh, forget it, because of everything else we've talked about.
Right.
But I think that's the biggest one. It's not all of a sudden, no, you die without anything in place, we're going to legally use the courts to get it and put it in some kind of, vault in Sacramento or whatever. That's not happening.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm sure a lot of people will be relieved to know that the state of California is not going to swoop in and just
no,
take
they don't
all
take
of
it, but it's all these other reasons to do it. So,
but hey, I was going to say, if that's the reason that they need to go get a trust attorney and put the trust in place, by all means, let them go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
For my home buyer clients, oftentimes they don't have a trust before they're buying their first home, for example. How long would you say it would take from start to finish to establish a trust? By the time you meet with the client, on average, I know a lot of it will depend on how organized they are and how long it takes them to get you the information.
Or how complicated, what we're doing, or make some final decisions, depending upon, scheduling. From the time that I, not have the initial conversation, but from the time that we get the questionnaire and we go through everything, typically from then to me getting drafts to them is about 30 days. And then things just depend. So, but from talking to someone saying, hey, I need to do this, till we get started, that can vary, just depending. But from talking to them and really having a good, full conversation, going through everything, and then drafts, about 30 days.
Okay. And what happens if over time changes need to be made to a trust? They end up buying another home, or they sell a property, or they acquire some other assets. Is it just a matter of a phone call or an email? Hey, Andrew, we bought another house.
Right.
If we buy an investment property or
Right.
whatever.
I'd say
the
if you
case may
buy
be.
another house, close escrow. Ideally, if the trust is in existence, you can close escrow, title of the property in the trust.
In the name
Great.
of the trust, yeah.
If you're getting a loan and the underwriter says, no, we're only going to underwrite this for you or you and your spouse, and then we close escrow, then we'd have to deed it from individuals to the trust afterwards, and that's fine. So that's just an extra deed. If someone opens up a new bank account, put it in the trust. Investment account, put it in the trust. Sometimes we might need to amend the trust if there's a new asset, if we've called out a certain asset going to a particular person in the trust. So let's say someone has vacation home in Big Bear and they're on 123, Main Street, and that property is going to their nephew Johnny, and they sell that property now and they buy a new one. Did you want the new property to go to the same person or only that property that's not mentioned? What do you want to do? So that might involve some changes. Just depends.
Yeah, so much to think about, but
Yeah.
all important stuff. Mm-hmm. Any parting thoughts? Is there anything that we haven't discussed? I know we've discussed a lot of things today. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you think is important that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
I would say if you're not sure about this, but you think you need something done, give me a call. Be happy to chat for a few minutes and kind of see where things are.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Because people don't usually know what's going on, and it's like, okay, here's what's happening.
Well, there's also a lot of misinformation out there, not just about trust and wills, but about a lot of different things. I mean, you can Google anything, you can YouTube anything, and
yeah,
it's like going to WebMD to diagnose yourself. I mean, everything is cancer,
and
exactly. So you really need to, I think, inform yourself with the proper, reputable resources. And I think doing your initial diligence and finding what you can find online is always great.
To an extent.
To an extent, yes.
You can look at your knee and say that bump is a tumor, and then remember, oh, wait a minute, I banged it against the table the other day.
Exactly, exactly. Well, you are such a joy. You're such a professional.
Thank you
so much for
Appreciate it.
Not just being in my life as a friend, but also for being my trusted estate planning attorney. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
everything that you've done for
My
me
pleasure.
and my family.
Yeah, and we've been talking about getting together and doing this for probably a couple of years now, so this is awesome.
I know. It took quite a bit of time, but everything happens in perfect timing. I'm a firm believer of that.
Yep.
So thank you so much for
Thanks,
being
Christine. I appreciate
here. And to all of you, thank you so much again for joining me. If you have any questions about trusts and estate planning, real estate, anything pertaining to your personal assets and your financial future, please feel free to hit me up. I have amazing resources that are super close to me that I personally trust, such as Andrew over here. I would be happy to get you in touch with them. Until next time, take care. I'll talk to you soon.